I'm so excited, everyone. This is going to be an amazing session. I promise you're not going to regret spending an hour with us today because we are going to go through everything and all things that you have questions about with Salesforce and building your own consultancy and being a Salesforce consultant, what that looks like. So this is going to be an amazing session. I'm so excited to have everyone here. As we are getting started, don't forget, turn your chat to panelists and attendees. And I want to hear from y'all. Who are you? Where are you coming from? I'm coming from beautiful Fort Worth, Texas. It is the first day without rain in like 5 days. So it's very exciting for me. Where are you coming from, Ben?
I'm in sunny London, and I say that ironically. I look up my Apple map, my Apple weather even, and it's just rain, 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 and we're nearly in June. So, yeah. But I like London apart from that.
Is it always wet? I feel like that's just like a common stereotype.
Yeah, the stereotype is semi-true. It does tend to rain quite a lot, but then we do have a few glorious months of sun in the summer, which should be starting now. So yeah, cross fingers.
I love that. Well, hopefully this will be a sunny part of your day. So we're going to get started on some intro, some housekeeping, and then we'll get into the questions. So my name is Katie Ray. I'm the community manager over here at Sales Hacker. We're so excited to have Salesforce Ben here. So I'll let him do a little intro and share all of his amazing accolades.
Yeah, hi guys, pleasure to be here, and thank you, Katie, for having me on Sales Hacker webinar, Ask Me Anything. So yeah, my name is Ben. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for coming up to 10 years now. I've worked as an admin, as a business analyst. I've worked for a consultancy, for a ISV, an app exchange company before, also a Salesforce MVP. Most recently, I started a Salesforce Consultancy of my own that I left last year, so I ran that for 4 years. And I'm also the founder of SalesforceBen.com, which is the largest Salesforce news site in the world. And I'm there full time now, which is very fun.
That is awesome. Yeah, if you guys haven't checked it out, I'll drop the link in here in a bit. It's absolutely amazing. But yeah, as we get started, once again, do a few little housekeeping things. Make sure that your chat is turned to panelists and attendees. We want everyone to hear and see your great insights and questions and ideas. Also, we're going to make this very engaging, very conversation focused. So make sure at the very bottom of the screen, you're looking at the Q&A box and you are dropping your questions in there so we can answer them in real time. But for those of you that are my favorite type of people, my overachievers, if you were able to drop a question into the conversation thread at saleshacker.com, don't worry, I'll pop the link into the chat as well. But if you were able to drop a question in there, we're going to start going through those and then taking the questions in real time as well that you are coming up with, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of follow-up questions. I know I've got a lot just jumbling around in my brain right now. So, and as always, these are recorded. They are sent out to everyone who registered for the event within 24 hours. So keep an eye out for that as well. And yeah, if you're okay with it, Ben, let's just get started. And we can start with my question. How did you get into being a Salesforce consultant? And what did that process look like for you?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to fall into Salesforce straight out of university. So kind of spamming my CV everywhere to IT jobs. I did information systems at uni and just fell into Salesforce consulting and, well, the Salesforce world. But then I suppose the way I got into consulting was I was a Salesforce admin and then kind of logically wanted to be in a place where I could maximize my learning. And I think a lot of people will go from that Salesforce admin working in it internally at a company and you know, that role is fantastic. But if you want to expand your knowledge and grow your career in an accelerated way, then working for a consultancy is just the best thing to do. And that's kind of what led me to that path.
What about consultancies help accelerate your career? Why is that so important?
Yeah, so I suppose if you're an admin, you're working for you have one customer, right, your end user, and while that could be, I don't know, Coca-Cola with 100,000 licenses or something like that, more often than not, you're probably working either in a small team or just by yourself. So, you know, you might not have teammates to learn off. You're also working with one org, not multiple orgs. And it's that experience of seeing multiple orgs in multiple industries with different use cases is just a fantastic way to grow your career. And that's kind of the world that I wanted to dive into.
So you started off with working for a consultancy, and now you're your own consultancy. What what did you have to do in the middle between those two poles that you've balanced between?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. So I didn't found my own consultancy. I joined a consultancy called Empower, which was just starting its UK office. They were based out of Berlin. There were four of us. The managing director left. Our sales guy left. It was just me and another consultant. So I kind of got promoted to managing director as default. And we didn't have any customers. We had zero revenue. So I kind of took it as a massive opportunity to start something of my own, put my flag somewhere. So over 4 years, I grew it to £2 million, 2.5 million dollars in revenue, and about 25 people in headcount. So I kind of co-founded the consultancy.
I mean, that type of growth, what did that look like? What are there any specific examples where you're like, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?" Because I'm
Yes,
sure it wasn't just easy, right?
no, I had a lot of sleepless nights, like signing a big deal and wondering how the hell we were going to deliver that is a bit nerve wracking. But I suppose the secret to our growth, and I've just released a book called Secrets to Building a Salesforce Consultancy, which is from my experience building a consultancy over the past 4 years. And I would say the secret was the niches we focused on. So we focused on hypergrowth and startup companies, which isn't really a vertical like FinServe, but more of a horizontal, but no one else was doing it. And then we also focused on fintech, which is a vertical inside the startup hypergrowth area. And there was no one around that was doing that. So it just meant we got a few really good logos and just built upon that. We knew what we were doing in fintech and with hypergrowth, all these kind of startup-y industries like prop tech, insurtech. We got loads of logos from them, and it just enabled us to build and build in those niches. So, I think that goes for any business you found that ever. It's finding that niche, your sweet spot, and then just doubling down on that and growing from there. Exactly like Sales Hacker did, I'm sure.
Probably our sleepless nights were a little less stress filled, hopefully. But as we're looking about how you're building these relationships, what are you doing to stay on top of industry trends? And how have you seen the industry evolve, especially whenever it comes to Salesforce?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, I suppose I'm one of those people that if I don't know, waiting for someone, I'm on my phone, like scrolling through whatever social network I've got. And I do that with LinkedIn. And I have to say, I've done that for the past, 8 years. I'm just on my phone scrolling through LinkedIn. That keeps me plugged into absolutely everything. Like I've got about 23,000 people on my LinkedIn. So, if there's any news in the Salesforce ecosystem, I can kind of get a handle on it. But if you don't have 23,000 people on your LinkedIn, there are loads and loads of blogs out there like Salesforce Ben, which all they do is blog about Salesforce. And that is, I would say, the best way to stay plugged in. But the Salesforce ecosystem, in terms of how it's evolving, is very, very interesting at the moment. When I started my career back in 2012, it was just Sales Cloud and for selling, obviously, and then Service Cloud for customer support, and then Marketing Cloud, which they just acquired in 2011 or 2012. Now, I couldn't even name all the clouds. Like there are so many different areas, so many products Salesforce has produced and also acquired in. So their platform is absolutely massive now. And for people kind of joining the ecosystem, it can be a bit overwhelming. But Salesforce are trying to create this platform where they can serve their customers with any need they have. And I think they're accomplishing that very well at the moment.
Wow, absolutely. I can't even imagine like what the OG version of Salesforce looks like.
Yeah, there are some pictures online. It's pretty funny. They modeled it off Amazon.com. So Mark Benioff wanted it to be wanted a CRM to be as easy to use as Amazon. So that's why on Salesforce Classic you've got the tabs that run across the top like an e-commerce website.
Interesting. I think that's so insightful. I love using Salesforce. I am probably one of the only ex-salespeople that actually really, really, really appreciated it. But I'm also like, I really like things organized, and so it's always really easy for me to leverage that, especially in sales. What as we're talking about Salesforce specifically, what are some apps that you always are like your go-to, highly recommend to your clients that integrate with Salesforce or best support Salesforce?
Yeah, I think there's one favorite of mine, which I'm a bit biased. I used to work for Conga, which is one of the biggest Salesforce App Exchange companies, which do document generation. And I think document generation, there's not just Conga out there, there's SDocs and DocuMill and loads of other apps. But when you buy a document generation app, there's no limit to the types of documents you can generate out of Salesforce. It could be invoices, quotes, contracts, presentations, anything like that. So that's a real game-changing bit of equipment that people can install. Something that I think is accelerating in adoption at the moment is DevOps tools. So Salesforce is notoriously hard to work with if you're a developer. It got voted on Stack Exchange the least favorite tool to work with by developers a few years ago. That's changing now because Salesforce is putting a lot of emphasis on the developer experience. They've got a suite of products called Salesforce DX, but a lot of other companies are coming out putting their own tools out there like GearSec, Pardo, Flowsome, AutoRabbit, which makes Salesforce deployments a lot easier. So those are a couple of apps that I would recommend people to look into.
What are some that have just maybe they're still like in beta phase that you see are going to be making a big splash in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Types of apps. I've seen one actually, which I think is quite exciting, from a friend of mine, which is analyze it. There's an app called Field Trip, which allows you to analyze the percentage times fields are used. So if you have your account name, that'll be used 100% of the time. But if you've got this custom field that no one knows about, it might be used 1% of the time. And my friend's bringing out an app which goes a step further than that and gives you loads of analytics in terms of which fields are used, which are not being used, and that enables it gives admins information in order to kind of curate their org and ensure that only required fields are on the layout and things like that. So that's something that's quite interesting.
Whenever we're looking at applications to choose from, what are some features that we should be really thinking of, or like what would be a good checklist, especially whenever we're looking for something to support our Salesforce use?
Good question. I might need to have a think about that one and create kind of an extensive list. But I mean, if it's native, that's obviously better in some respect. If it's inside of Salesforce, uses native Salesforce objects. Sometimes that's better. That's not saying apps that you API in and integrate aren't good, but it could be argued that native is better. I also think it's very important to look at how many objects and how much of your resources this app uses inside Salesforce. Some things are very, very heavy. If you're looking at like an accounting package or something like that, that could blow up all your limits straight away if you've got quite a heavy org. So those are a couple of things. I'll have a think of a few more though.
Yeah, that would. Hey, now we know what your next article will be.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
A Salesforce approved checklist. So some of the questions around here or on the thread are really about like starting projects and building reports and getting a little into the nitty gritty. So one of the questions is, when you're beginning a new project, what technical debt are you most often faced with clearing up? In other words, what's the most common issue with people's sales tech stacks that you've seen?
Yeah, I would have to say it's definitely. I mean, the great thing about Salesforce is it's so easy to configure. Even someone with no experience can go in and probably create a workflow rule that does some automation or something like that. But that's also one of Salesforce's downsides, because it's so easy to do stuff that people do, even if they're not qualified. And that means that an org over time can have loads and loads of configuration that people have just bolted in. I've worked with people where you get a bit of a naive Salesforce admin, and the sales manager will be going, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, and the admin is just like, yep, sure, with no real thought of what's scalable, how is this thing going to look in 5 years' time. And that's something that a lot of consultancies go through, because they'll take on an org and realize there's so much, technical debt and issues with the code, legacy code, and things like that. I think a lot of admins can relate to that kind of struggle, taking over an org which someone else has, or many people have had their fingers in. That can be a bit stressful.
Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. And I think that's something where, as we look at revenue operations and where being a Salesforce admin fits into that and what that looks like, I think, we're at a really interesting time in really defining what that role looks like and how they all interact with each other. So I think that's super interesting. This is a fun question. What's your most longed for Salesforce feature request that still hasn't been implemented?
Ooh, good question. See, for ages, it was the fact that you couldn't. You've got like page layouts and record types that people might know on this call, where you can change the page layout for a record type. But let's say you wanted a different page layout at different stages of the opportunity cycle. You need to create a record type for every single stage and every single page layout, not scalable. Dynamic forms are something that's coming out, which is like componentized page layouts, which can be hidden or made visible depending on field values, which is very, very cool. That is actually out at the moment, so it was a feature that I wanted for a long time, but only on custom objects. So it's coming out. Well, I don't know if we've got a date, but it will be out in standard objects at some point. But that is a very cool feature. The customization that's going to be enabled by that on Salesforce is going to be huge.
What do you think? Okay, so this is a little side conversation or side question. One of our RevOps pros at Outreach, Faraz, had asked this question on Sales Hacker a couple weeks back, and his philosophy was that Salesforce should sunset the leads and contacts and consolidate it into people. What do you think about that shift? Because I know other CRMs are already doing that, if not already have.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to comment on that without more context, because I guess I personally like the way that Salesforce is set up at the moment. I haven't actually used that many CRMs, but leads, it keeps things very, very separate. Leads can be completely unqualified, potentially rubbish data. They sit over there in their bucket, and then accounts and contacts are the serious stuff that's been qualified. So I personally quite like that. I think HubSpot might do contacts actually, right, and with different stages, something like that. But yeah, I'm not too sure how that would work. So I'm going to stay in the Salesforce camp for now, though. But I like his philosophy.
He's definitely a hoot. Now, please forgive me. I could be saying your name wrong. It's either Romy or Rami. Dropped a question. What are your thoughts on having the ability to change text or highlight by color or font, being able to do that for important fields without having to buy an app from the App Exchange?
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. I think there's loads of small things like this which Salesforce could implement. But I guess it's probably not high up on their priority list. Like, you could do that with code, but I'd admit for an admin, it would be quite nice just to do that, to highlight it. With things like dynamic forms coming out, I think there'll be other ways to highlight it apart from just doing it with color. But I like that idea. I think it might make sense. I would submit it on the Idea Exchange, and then it can get upvoted and hopefully implemented.
And for those of you that don't know, where can we find this Idea Exchange? I'm assuming it's in Trailhead.
Yeah, if you just type into Google Salesforce Ideas, they've had it for many, many years, and it's just a way for people to submit feature requests, and then people upvote, and then Salesforce will update that kind of ticket as time goes on, to say whether it's being implemented or not, or whether it's kind of in the near roadmap or long-term roadmap.
Gotcha. We have a really, really good question from Kristen. Do you have a recommended way to track real-time MRR in Salesforce, or do you recommend third-party installations like Sales Optics? Or an example, Sales Optics?
Yeah, very, very good question. We used to work with a lot of startups which were in SaaS when I was at Empower, and Salesforce isn't set up for SaaS businesses. We use Salesforce, and I sell ad space. So I kind of, just put in, let's say, $1,000 into an opportunity, hit close, and that gives me my revenue in a nice chart. Obviously, if you're SaaS, you might be doing $1,000 a month or something like that. And you need to use something called product schedules, which splits out that, let's say, $12,000 into 12 monthly installments. That is a way that you can start tracking monthly recurring revenue. But that's kind of a point solution just for that thing. We built a lot of custom stuff for SaaS businesses, which cost tens of thousands for renewals and things like that. So CPQ could be a good thing to look for if you were looking for a kind of a more comprehensive solution. The apps that I've seen, like SaaS Optics and a bunch of other ones, are very good. And a lot of people, SaaS businesses that I've worked with, do have them because they're very easy to implement. They just plug into Salesforce and pretty much give you out of the box dashboards. So I suppose it really depends what you want. If it's just that reporting and your business is a bit too complicated to implement a solution on Salesforce, I would say definitely go for one of those third-party apps.
Do you recommend building your apps custom? Or do you recommend a custom build or using the apps that you see in there?
Yeah, definitely depends. Definitely depends on the use case. I mean, there's a famous question in the Salesforce admin exam which gives you a really complicated. It says, should you build this app, and puts as a really complicated requirements. And one of the answers is you just look at the App Exchange for an app. So I think if it is a really complicated app, building it custom probably isn't the way to go. It could cost you tens of thousands of pounds, and you have to upkeep that. I mean, that's kind of the argument of on-premise solutions versus SaaS solutions. But if it's simple and easy to maintain, then it's probably a good idea to build it yourself, especially if there's nothing out there which is reasonable. But I think it depends on complexity, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even on the most simplistic scale in life, right? We all go through weighing the pros and cons of, if I do it myself and I build it, how much is that going to cost versus buying something that's already built, and what is my time worth to me?
Yeah.
I can only imagine, especially whenever we're looking at how complex tools for Salesforce can be. To me, that just gives me a headache.
Yeah. Exactly.
I can't even. So we also have another really good question. What's your secret for visualizing dashboard data effectively as it pertains to revenue?
Good question. Salesforce dashboards are pretty powerful. You just need to ensure that your data is in a good state so you can actually report on it. So one example is going back to that MRR example. If you've just got one field which says 12 grand and that's not split out by month using product schedules, you're not really going to see that great data or any revenue recognition or anything like that. So definitely make sure your data is in order, but remember that Salesforce reports and dashboards do have their limitations. That's why Tableau exists. Tableau CRM is used to be called Einstein Analytics, which sits on Salesforce. So that's a good option if you reach limitations of reports and dashboards, or things like Sales Optics for revenue recognition and reporting might be better suited.
Awesome. Yeah, I wonder, and I'm kind of curious, whenever you're thinking about what you want to measure, what is the process that you normally go through for that?
Yeah, it's definitely working backwards. So kind of visualizing, what data you want to see in Salesforce, and then going backwards to understand, okay, what data needs to be entered, and then what does the data model look like? Can you just do that with one object, or do you need to create a parent-child relationship, or potentially something more complicated? And then getting a big whiteboard and kind of mapping out various solutions and things like that to try and see what data model will fit.
Yeah, that's a really good plan. Always building backwards with the goal in mind, I think, is always going to make a huge difference. Now, this is kind of an interesting question. Whenever we look at Salesforce competition, do we consider HubSpot CRM as a concern, or do they still kind of run in their own circles?
I have used HubSpot. I'm not super familiar on it, so I don't feel like I'm completely qualified to answer this. But we used to migrate. HubSpot seems to be the go-to for startups because I think it's free actually until you have a certain and then obviously scales up from there. And we used to migrate a lot of people away from HubSpot, or they would actually use the marketing automation but move away from the CRM. It's got a very good integration with Salesforce for marketing automation, so that works very well. I think why people leave HubSpot to go to Salesforce is just because of the scalability. I don't think HubSpot have anywhere near the platform that sits across Salesforce to build all these customizations and develop. It's not as advanced as Salesforce's. So it means when a business gets to a certain point where they need to customize it, they need to look at something that can scale a bit further. But I mean, I think HubSpot, from what I've heard, is probably great for some types of businesses. I don't really think they're making a dent in Salesforce's market share, though, because Salesforce released their annual kind of market share thing, and I think Salesforce have got 19.9%, which is increasing year over year. All the other ones are kind of at the bottom, with I think Oracle's got maybe 6%, and then there's Dynamics with 1%. I don't think HubSpot are on there actually, so I wouldn't say there's big competition, but I think HubSpot is pretty good.
Awesome. That's really interesting. Good to know. What tips do you have for change management of end users? Often, leadership are worried about how this will impact the sales org, and they won't appreciate the change that's needed for the desired business outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, primarily, I think it's getting people on board. I think a lot of people don't understand. A lot of salespeople will think of Salesforce as an admin tool, and a lot of senior leadership people will see the cost that Salesforce brings and wonder, why the hell are we spending this amount of money on it? And there are a lot of bad Salesforce implementations out there, unfortunately. So I think it's really demonstrating value. And if you do run an org that you feel like you want to get people on side, you can bring, if you've got enough licenses, if you've got one license, they probably wouldn't do this, but you can bring Salesforce in to do demos to the leadership team to support you in building a business case for Salesforce. So it's definitely providing a value to the leadership team, but also involving middle management and users in this journey to understand what they want to do with the system. And then you get your super users and your champions and things like that to really help the implementation. But I think as involving, not too many people, obviously you don't want to overload yourself, but representatives from each team, and definitely getting an executive sponsor is a great way to help with that change management.
Absolutely. And I'm sure one of the ways that you can really evolve and encourage that change is by making sure that meetings generated is being attributed to the right people, right? People want to get credit for where credit's due oftentimes. What are some what are some things that people, and especially Salesforce admins, should be looking for as they're building out some of these marketing efforts and campaigns and measuring lead sources in Salesforce?
Yeah, great question. It's definitely a big sticking point with most of our projects, because people wouldn't really, they may be self-implemented and they just have this huge lead source list with conference 2017 and conference 2018, this massive list. Well, in fact, lead source should be a bit higher level, should be social media or email or Google Ads or something like that. And then, using campaigns on top of that can be extremely powerful. So you would usually create a campaign for, if you say a conference or something like that, you can attribute all the leads to the conference, maybe even some contacts, existing people customers that have also attended. You can attribute that. And then Salesforce has various automations that link up people, and if there's an opportunity generated recently and there was a campaign that someone attended recently, you can join those up. And then the campaign, if a campaign is set up properly, you can put in how much that campaign cost, how much pipeline has been generated, and how much is actually closed as a result of that. The one thing Salesforce isn't that great with, unless you have a tool like Pardot, is multi-touch attribution. But there are lots of apps that can plug in that do that as well.
Yeah, Outreach is a good one.
Definitely.
Definitely good for helping with that. So we still have a lot of questions about getting into building a consultancy. So if you're okay with it, I want to take a little bit more time focused on advice you would give for people to get into consultancy. So I think the number one question that we'll start off with is, how did you know that consultancy was the right path for you?
Yeah, so it's definitely not a path for everyone, I would say. I chose it. I was working at Conga at the time as a business analyst, so I was mainly working on the Conga products, which is very niche document generation, and I wanted to learn more about the ecosystem, more about the different Salesforce products. I also don't have any kids. You know, I live with my girlfriend, but you know, we don't have any dependents or anything like that. Not a lot of life stress, so it was quite a good point in my life to do that. However, if you do have, you know, lots going on in your personal life, maybe, you know, newborn kids, anything like that, consulting might not be right for you, because it's not excruciating hours like banking or something, but occasionally you might need to stay longer to deliver something on time. You know, it can be a bit stressful, but the learning is second to none. And you know, you might love that kind of environment where it's like high paced, fast, things like that. So yeah, it's definitely not for everyone, but for a good portion of people, it's a very logical career step, if you're within Salesforce, or if you're out of Salesforce and want to go into it.
So now that we know why we want to get into consultancy or what we think may come from it, what certifications would we need to get to become a Salesforce consultant?
Yeah, so admin is definitely, if you don't have your admin, that's like the base level certification. Not a lot of people mention this as the next one, but platform app builder. So just to give you an overview of admin, so that's kind of like the core knowledge of sales and service cloud, which is the Salesforce platform. And then platform app builder is the point and click functionality, point and click configuration you can do to those systems. So building custom fields, custom workflows, automation, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that is, if you're an admin or a consultant, that is the bulk of work you will be doing, will be customizing Salesforce using these point and click tools, because you probably won't be a developer which can actually code or build custom pages or things like that. And then you've got a bunch of consultant certifications which go deeper into each product. So you've got sales, service, Pardot, CPQ, and these go really deep into the product, but also apply kind of softer questions, you know, like a project isn't going so well, what should you do, things like that. So yeah, I would say admin, platform app builder, and then going into the consultant ones. And if you're from a developer background, then the developer certifications are great as well.
What about those that have spent years in Salesforce, since day one of Salesforce? Do you think that certifications would add value to what they know? Do you think the certifications may weigh more than experience whenever jumping into something like this?
Yeah, very good question. And it's kind of like an age old debate, which is fading out a bit now, because it was, you know, there were people, you know, young professionals who had 20 certifications or something like that. And some people's arguments were, you know, they are as good as experience or something like that. And after a few debates on our blog and a few debates I've seen on LinkedIn, you know, it's safe to say experience triumphs certifications completely. You know, if you think I could sit at home not working with any clients and get 20 certifications with a lot of studying and revision. But if you're out in a consultancy and maybe you've done 20 end-to-end projects, that's going to be worth a huge amount more than 20 certifications. I think certifications can always add value, even if you've got 10 years experience in Salesforce, because it forces you to learn about a product in certain areas you might not have come across before. So they are valuable, but there are also plenty of people who have 10 years experience, 8 years experience with no certifications because they just don't need them. So they're definitely, I would say they're definitely good to have on your CV. If you're working for a consultancy is tiered. So Salesforce Tiers consultancies, and consultancies will get points based on a various number of things, but a big portion of that comes from certs. So if you have 5 certs, you're going to be a lot more desirable to a consultancy than someone who doesn't have any.
That's super helpful. I had no idea about the tiered Do you, what is like, I'm just kind of curious myself. What is like the ultimate tier? Like, how many certifications do you need to have? And like, how much experience do you need to have to be at like the top tier of it?
Yeah, so you have registered, which is like the base level. Actually, I'll caveat that this saying it has changed. It's changed to something confusing. So you used to have registered, silver, gold, platinum, and then GSI, which is Global Solution Integrator. So to be a GSI, you have to be a platinum in multiple countries. So think Accenture, Deloitte, Blue Wolf. These kind of people are GSIs. They've changed it now to be like Summit, Ridge. I don't know. They're all kind of mountaineering terms, but they're more for internal at Salesforce as opposed to advertising to your customers. So before it was like, hey, Mr. Customer, I'm a gold Salesforce partner. Now I don't think they use them externally so much. It's more internal for your relationship with Salesforce.
That's awesome. And for someone who is wanting to become a Salesforce consultant, is there anything that they need to do with Salesforce other than get their certifications? Do they need to join maybe an MVP group or a community?
Yeah, I mean, being a consultant, the more knowledge you have, the better, really. So we've got loads of content over Salesforce. Ben, Sales Hacker, I'm sure is fantastic because most of the time people are working on Sales Cloud projects. So inadvertently, you kind of become a sales consultant as well because you understand best practices when it comes to lead routing or qualification or things like that. So yeah, learning as much as possible. Project management skills are also very valuable. Most consultancies will have a dedicated project manager, so you don't necessarily have to worry about that. But knowing how to move a project along and hitting milestones and sticking to the scope and all these kind of things that come up in any project is very valuable to have.
That's awesome. And I know Salesforce has a lot of really great resources inside of their community. For someone that is just curious about Salesforce, they've never really had much interaction with it. What would be like the go-to place for them to learn if getting a certification or becoming a consultant would be the right path for them?
Yeah, so you've got Trailhead, which is Salesforce's learning management system. So it's got a lot of gamification with it, so a lot of modules that you can walk through step by step for anyone. If you're a complete beginner or more advanced or expert level, there's something for everyone. That is where most people start. They've got things called, so you've got the modules, and then they've got things called trails. So if you want to become a Salesforce consultant, you could take the consultant trail, which is lots of modules. If you want to become an admin, there's an admin trail. So that is the best place to start. If you're more interested in passing a certification, they have courses which are paid. There are a few thousand, I think, but they are specific for passing a cert. Trailhead, I would say, is more for broader knowledge on the platform as opposed to the specific things you need to know to pass the certification.
That's awesome. Well, that's so incredibly helpful. I think we have gone through almost all of our questions, which is fabulous. There are a few, so for those of you who didn't get your questions answered, don't worry. Ben has been so kind and generous. He's actually going to go through and respond to every single one of our questions on the actual thread because there's some specific things that I'm sure he'll need a little bit more details from you on about like what module should I take and like what specific certification. And so keep an eye out for that. But I think with like the next few minutes, I'd love to hear if you could kind of summarize our conversation today. What would you say are like the top 2 or 3 things that people should keep in mind whenever they're considering becoming a Salesforce consultant?
Yeah, so I think a career in Salesforce has been fantastic to me, and people kind of compare it to a cult a bit because when people get into it, they're so passionate about advocating a career in Salesforce. There's a lot of people who have gone from industries completely outside of IT, lost their jobs because of COVID, and transitioned to a career in Salesforce by using Trailhead There are a few career coaches out there as well now, which will kind of coach you to get a job, which have been very successful. So get a career in Salesforce is very, very lucrative for a number of reasons. Specifically, becoming a consultant is a very, very good career choice. It's very engaging. You have to be very dynamic. As I said before, it can be stressful at sometimes, delivering projects, as I'm sure anyone who's worked in IT projects would know. But you do learn a lot. And if you join the right consultancy, you'll have a lot of support around you, a lot of experienced people around you who can mentor you on the technical side of things, but also, possibly more importantly, the softer side of things when speaking to clients, requirements gathering, all these kinds of things. So yeah, it's a good space to be in right now. And if anyone's got any other questions or anything like that, then feel free to put them on the thread or message me on LinkedIn, or check out the site as well.
Absolutely. That's such great points to kind of wrap all this up with, because I mean, you're so right. We've Salesforce and cloud solutions and CRMs, all these buzzwords. I mean, they're really going to continue to grow and blossom and evolve, especially as our sales teams needs evolve and our RevOps teams needs evolve. So this is definitely an amazing time to get involved with Salesforce and companies like it. So I dropped Ben's LinkedIn link into the chat, so definitely go and connect with him. You also have a few other links in there. You've got our thread to the discussion. If you are nervous about asking a question, no worries. You can drop it in there. You can message it to me or Ben directly, and we'll get you an answer. And then I also dropped Ben's website link in there as well. So definitely check that out. I think that this has just been absolutely amazing. I know I've learned so much, and I'm just so thankful for all of your help and your great advice, Ben. This has just been so much fun.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for hosting.
Absolutely. Have a good one, y'all. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.